This broadcast of Cultural Caravan is paid for by Cultural Caravan Productions Incorporated.
This program is sponsored in part by Dinizulu Cultural Arts Institute, presenting master dance classes with Congolese dancer Famu Jamez, December 11th at Inner City Theater Arts Center, 11428 Merrick Boulevard, Queens, New York. Call 347-454-9026. 347-454-9026. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. And this edition is a special as we come to part 2 of our conversation with Dr. Sarah L. Webb. She is the foremost expert on the topic of colorism in our community. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm excited to get back and continue the conversation.
Well, in our first conversation, we really talked about the history of colorism, how it's impacted our people, and certain things that, we need to be aware of. Now we're just going to talk about the responses. What has been the responses across the country to this topic by people in our community and beyond?
The focus on the responses from people in our community is really interesting, because I will say I get the most pushback from people in our community. When I'm doing corporate trainings, a lot of times white folks, they're just like, oh, wasn't aware of this. Like, please just tell us more. And so they're and then people from like the South Asian community, where they have a really significant colorism issue there. There's a more openness to the conversation. I think amongst us as Black people, you get the airing our dirty laundry type of feedback, and like, why are you being divisive? Why are you trying to separate us? Why are you making differences when we're all Black, right? And so that's why, as I said in the first segment, I always look at the research. So what I tell people is having this conversation is not divisive. Colorism is divisive. And so talking about the problem is not the same as causing the problem. And we're not going to solve it if we keep pretending like it's not a problem. And I do get, when I first started talking about colorism over a decade ago, I got like really angry pushback. People were very, very angry, like cursing me out on social media type of anger. And a lot of it came from other light-skinned people who, one, just don't want to acknowledge the idea of privilege, right? I think a lot of Black people of all shades have a really hard time using that word. I think it's been a demonized word, the idea of privilege, like, oh, I can't have any privilege and I don't have any privilege. And I think that's unhelpful, is to the trying to make it seem as though every Black person on the planet is having the exact same experience is actually not helpful for us as Black people to work through our legitimate issues. And so, for example, if we were to say, oh, well, Black men are having the exact same experience as Black women, right? People can kind of see like, well, that's not necessarily true, right? Like, there are distinct experiences if you're a woman versus being a man who is Black. And so it's the same thing for being a lighter skinned Black person, or even a medium brown skinned person versus a dark skinned person. And the biggest comment is that people think that it's called reverse colorism. And I actually did a reel in collaboration with someone named Blair Imani, where we talked about the idea of reverse colorism. And the basic premise of the reel was that just like there's no reverse racism, there's also no reverse colorism. And so even though you can be mean to a white person, right? A Black person can definitely be mean to a white person, but that doesn't equate to the system of racism. And so even though a dark-skinned person can be mean to a light-skinned person, that light-skinned person is not systemically oppressed, systemically discriminated against because they are light skinned, even if they are experiencing bullying or name calling, or people don't want to be their friends. And I think the important piece here is that for light skinned people who experience bullying because they're light skinned, is that what if you said, I'm experiencing this bullying because of colorism, and not that it's because I'm light skinned? And what I mean by that is when people are under an oppressive system and they respond to that oppression, when they react to that oppression, when there's backlash to an oppressive system, then a lot of times it comes out in anger. It comes out in various forms of bullying or microaggressions or antagonism. And so for our lighter skinned siblings who want to stop the leak, they have to be willing to fix the pipes. And so if you're bullied as a light skinned person, that is the leak, and colorism is the pipe, right? And so needing to say, like, I exist in a system that gives me a greater unfair advantage over darker skinned people. And because of that, sometimes those darker skinned people take out their resentment on me for the larger system. However, if I am playing into that system, if I am being silent while my darker skinned brothers are being oppressed, if I am not actively trying to dismantle this system that privileges me as a lighter skinned person, then I can't say that these attacks or this backlash or this type of antagonism is coming out of nowhere, right? Or that it just happens in a silo, or it exists, it's coming out of thin air. And so when we think about the responses between various people of skin tones and skin shades, it's not just enough to say, oh, well, we should all get along. But if someone in our community is actively participating in our oppression or being silent about our oppression, then they have to take accountability for that if they want to truly be in community with all of us.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that. I mean, I have to say this. First of all, I guess we have to make it clear that we acknowledge that African people come in a diverse rainbow, shade of rainbow. We all are people of African ancestry. So that's number one. I think that's the key thing. One thing about our oppression here, unlike in South America, I was telling someone that here one drop made you Black. Okay, so we didn't have, like in Brazil, where you were several different races based on your complexion, or in South Latin America, where one drop, someone, somebody as dark as you and I consider themselves white because they had one, so totally different in that respect. However, I think, as you said, we just have to deal with how can we heal. For example, the thing of marriage choices. There's some we know in entertainment, some of our people, particularly some of our men and women, like that, will deliberately, if they don't marry a white person, they will find someone that they had similar characteristics of, like very light skin, long hair, and that's real. That's the way in which, certain selections in Hollywood, certain some of our brothers directly, certain women who are the love interests are particularly look a certain way. They don't necessarily pick dark-skinned women. Now things are starting to change a little bit, not too much. But, that has to be looked at. I think, if as our people start to address these issues, say, look, we acknowledge that there is an issue. There is an issue where only certain Black people are picked for certain roles, or certain Black people, that we can address it. But as you said, putting our head in the sand and ignoring the fact that there are things that, based on white racism, that some people are benefiting from. How can we stop this so that all Black people acknowledge? For example, even the dolls, the famous doll case where Black children were selecting the white dolls over the Black dolls. That was, again, a process of that. So I think if we, as a people, start to acknowledge, yes, there are things. For example, I know you're familiar with Beyonce. Beyonce came out with a record, Dark Skin, where she acknowledged people like Lupita, what's her name, Nyong'o, and Kelly Rowland, and other darker skinned sisters as beautiful, and she wanted, I guess, her daughter to also be aware. And, so I think that there have been steps to kind of acknowledge and validate the variety of beauty within the African community. So what I'm saying is, what else can be done, in your opinion, to heal? What are some of the things that we can start doing to start to heal some of these issues as relates to colorism in our community?
I think you're right that the first point of healing is admitting that it's a thing and getting over the fear of making people uncomfortable, getting over well, I want the people pleasing, right? Like, I don't want to step on any toes, and so I'm not going to speak the truth. I think in order to heal, we have to be committed to telling the truth to ourselves first and foremost, but also to each other. And so, again, thinking about how it's not possible to heal colorism if we aren't clear about what it actually is. And so that educational piece of knowing, again, colorism is not just a popularity contest. It's not just who was the cute girl in high school. It's not just, who the boys want to date or not date. Like, colorism leads to greater instances of violence against death, incarceration, underemployment, poverty, sickness, right? For dark-skinned Black people. I even think about the medical devices like the pulse oximeter, which measures the oxygen in your blood, and how the darker your skin tone, the less accurate the reading is, right? Which could actually lead to death, right? And so we have to look at colorism from that perspective if we want to really heal ourselves as Black people. And looking at the most vulnerable people in our communities and really asking ourselves, how can we show up for the most vulnerable people in our communities? And when I use the example of the pulse oximeter and how the medical industry is literally designed to prefer and to privilege those with the lightest skin tones, the lightest and the whitest skin tones, and to ignore, erase, to essentially let die people with the darkest skin tones, then we will be able to actually get to the heart and the root of the problem. And so that courage to be 100% honest and to not center our individual experiences above the collective of Black people. And then I think the other thing is our willingness to understand that in all of this, none of us are going to win, right? No matter what skin tone you are, even if you get as close to winning as possible, right? No one wins in an oppressive system. And so how can we then make the sacrifices? Maybe the sacrifice is not the best word, but to say, I'm not going to step on one of my own people to get ahead in a system that wants all of us to fail anyway, right? I'm not going to leave behind my other Black brothers and sisters for the opportunity or the promise of greater capitalistic gain or greater clout or greater social status. And I think about your example of the man who said he wanted to marry the lightest skinned person so that his children come out lighter, right? And that's essentially what that pattern is doing. It's saying I'm going to throw all other Black people under the bus so that I can get ahead a little bit, so that my family can get ahead in society at the expense of all the other Black people that are struggling and that are experiencing oppression. And so to what degree we say we love Black people, if it's only certain types of Black people, then we don't really love Black people, right? And a lot of us, we like to pat ourselves on the back and say, I'm pro-Black and I love Black people. But then we start to Swiss cheese which Black people are worthy of that love, right? And a lot of times they are lighter skinned, or a lot of times they have a certain educational status or a certain socioeconomic status. And so we have to be deeply committed to loving all Black people, not just the ones that we think are worthy, not just the ones that we deem as respectable, not just the ones that can do something for us, right? In terms of that sort of opportunistic pattern that we might see play out sometimes. And to say you love Black people means you love Black people of all skin tones, all socioeconomic statuses, all genders, all languages and ethnicities of Black people. And to the healing piece, I think of it as an umbrella term. So there's the individual healing for yourself, your own self-esteem. There's the relationship healing. So where I have transgressed against a specific person in my family, where I have transgressed against people at work, we need to repair those bonds. And it starts again with being accountable, with being honest about how we have hurt each other. And then there's also the social justice piece. So the collective healing of, it's not enough just for me to learn how to love myself, but again, I need to be committed to creating social conditions where all people can thrive regardless of their skin tone. And I think when we see those three things happening simultaneously, we'll start to see the needle move. And I know we don't have all day to talk about this, but we can go deeper into each one of those three categories about what that might look like.
One of the things as educators is, I think it starts in the home. Black mother, women, a lot of times in our family, children come out a variety of complexions, okay? And I think that it's very important that at the root that all children, everybody be validated. Okay, so pictures, I know something about the late great Francis Cress Welsing talked about the importance of having pictures of people of African ancestry on the walls, celebrating the diversity of our people, and to show love. And because we're confronted with whiteness and a lot of this stuff all the time. When you turn on the tube, that's what you're confronted with. And so to start validating ourselves, so mothers not consciously or unconsciously telling our darker skinned children, you're not good enough, maybe by calling them names, because a lot of this comes from, you learn it from your mother, your grandmother. These particular children, I remember telling you, their grandmother said certain things to them that made them start to question themselves. So it starts in the home. If we start to love ourselves and checkmate each other for saying things that are based in colorism, and because unfortunately some of this self-hatred has been passed down from generation to generation, and to really accept all the children, let every child, regardless of what their hue, be accepted, loved, and felt good about themselves, and checkmated at the root. Because as you said, there's some brothers whose mothers have told them, oh, don't bring home a woman who, they use the same paper bag test. Don't bring home a dark-skinned woman, even though they may be dark-skinned, or don't bring this, or don't bring, so, a lot of this hatred comes from there. So I think we have to start as parents to validate and expect and accept all of our children, not use favoritism, so if they know they're loved by their mother, their father equally, they will be able to go out in the world and love themselves and love others. And I think that is another thing I wanted to put out there. That is
so I want to add on to that though, because when we say that the parents have to do this teaching and education for their children, it requires that parent has done their work first. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times people say, oh, well, we have to start with the children. I said, but we are impacting the children from our own wounded place. And so a lot of parents themselves have not learned to love themselves. And if you haven't learned to love yourself, how can you teach our children to love themselves, right? And also we know that children look at what they see. They look at what's demonstrated first and foremost. And so how can you as a parent demonstrate self-love of yourself, especially if you are a mother trying to show your daughters what self-love looks like, right? So it's one thing to tell your children, oh, you're beautiful, you're worthy, but they need to see an example of what that looks like in practice, right? Like mom, dad, how do you show up in self-love? How do you celebrate your Blackness? And it's also not just about what you say. So let's say you're like, oh, all skin tones are beautiful, but we only have light-skinned friends in the family. Or all shades of people are beautiful, but I tell you not to play with those dark-skinned kids, at school. And so you have to not just talk the talk, but you have to be about walking that walk and actually demonstrating to your children what it looks like to love yourself in your Blackness and to love all the various varieties of Blackness, right? Like actually showing them in practice what that looks like. And then I'll also say, while it starts at home, it also takes a village. And too often people will be dismissive and say like, oh, well, your parents should have taught you better, right? But like you're saying, if a child is growing up in a home where their mother is colorist, where their mother is demeaning them and berating them, that's when the rest of the community has to step up, right? And so a lot of times people will be dismissive of me teaching on a public platform because they say, oh, well, their parents should take care of that. I'm like, but too many of us don't have and did not have parents who had that capacity, who had done that work, their own inner work to be able to teach us. And so I'm doing it for the kids who are getting the colorism from their parents, right? Like, what about those children who don't have parental figures at home, or maybe they're in foster care, maybe they are adopted by white people who don't even know to teach them how to love their Blackness. And so I think while it in many cases does start at home, it absolutely takes a village if we're going to solve this problem. And so me, as someone who doesn't have kids, all Black children are my children. And I think that's also a mindset we need to take. It can't just be about, oh, I want the best for my individual kids. We should want the best for all Black kids. And so even if you don't have kids like me, like, how can we still spread this message and still educate people? And so I don't have kids, but if I'm talking to someone who does, if I'm educating the adults who do have children, I still see it as making an impact because it takes a village.
Absolutely. Now, this conversation is so broad and so rich, and so much therapy is needed, and so much support is needed for those in the audience. And I know that, as you said, this is something that impacts us as well as our brothers in Southeast Asia, our brothers, our sisters all over the planet, that we have to address this. And for those who would like to contact you, could you please give us some contact information?
Yes. So colorismhealing.com, colorismhealing.com is where you can contact me directly. Also, my email, you can contact me at Sarah or info@colorismhealing.com. And I'm also on social media, particularly Instagram and YouTube, also at Colorism Healing. And I have a support group for dark-skinned women, which has been really, really beautiful. I also do workshops for people of various skin tones to help them identify like both their pain and their privilege, because those two things can both exist at the same time. And also, again, trainings and workshops for institutions, businesses, and that sort of thing.
Well, again, I want to sincerely thank you, sis, for your work, your support to the community, because it's about healing. It's not about name calling. It's not about, we're dealing with surviving in a racist, white supremacist environment. And the behaviors are results of those type of situations, and how we can heal each other and go about becoming a community, one community. So again, I thank you. I look forward to having you back. Yeah. And I want to thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and we continue to encourage you to tune in, to write, and to tell a friend. But until next time, Louise Dente saying thank you.
This program is sponsored in part by Dinizulu Cultural Arts Institute, presenting master dance classes with Congolese dancer Famu Jamez, December 11th at Inner City Theater Arts Center, 11428 Merrick Boulevard, Queens, New York. Call 347-454-9026. 347-454-9026. Thank you.
like to support these broadcasts, we encourage you to send contributions to P.O. Box 300851, Jamaica, New York 11430. Thank you.